Welcome back everyone, it's Blue Inferno here, and in today's video I couldn't help but chime in with my opinion on the controversial hotfix number 69. I do have multiple arguments to support my assessment and why I think the patch is a good thing, but I can only start this video one way, by reminding you all to hold the line, like we all so proudly did before. It's clear that a large and loud group of people hate the changes, and it's your right to do so, but in my opinion, I really enjoy the changes they made. I see a brighter future for the game because of it. I've split the video into multiple arguments why I believe this, and I've left timestamps below if you want to skip to one point or another. Now with no further ado, let's begin. Let's start with the biggest issue the game has always faced, and that's balance, and how this patch has elevated Ranger and Barbarian to a level that the player base believes is unfair. And you'd not be wrong in that assessment at this time, and it's the first reason this patch is better than the old one. By simplifying the gear sets that are available, they can turn their attention to fine-tuning the classes. Every additional variable that is available adds an exponential level of complexity to the task at hand. For example, if you have 3 variables, there are only 9 possible outcomes to plan for. Well, if you have 4 variables, you have 16 potential outcomes, and 5 variables is 25, etc. By making all gear have base common stats, they've removed quite literally thousands of variables that cloud their ability to offer a consistent game experience. And there are really only 2 reasons to be upset that the playing field will become more even. One is if you invest a lot more time in the game than your average player and feel you should be rewarded with incredibly high odds of winning for time spent playing. Or 2, people who like to procure the finest assortments of goods, chasing the perfect build that can push them to new heights. The limitation in gear has reduced that ceiling dramatically in both those cases, and with this new system, we're trading out gear quality and insane statistic changes for a more balanced game experience in the long run. If anything, this gear change should really highlight how imbalanced the game really was. The reason these classes have come out of nowhere blindsiding everybody and being completely imbalanced is because of what it took to be able to do this before. A Ranger or Barbarian could have done the exact same thing before if they just invested in the gear, and you would still be fine with it if it was just as easy to reach the move speed cap. But now, you cannot. Dodging is harder because players are slower, and Barbarians are just great at running players down. All that has changed now is that neither player requires the investment in gear to see the glaring issue, and this will allow the developers to make the changes they need to make, where before you could say, you're just not geared right. Now we can close in on the actual problem at hand. There's not enough counterplay potential against these builds. And if the issue always remained ambiguous and veiled by the incredible gear discrepancies, the system would remain forever shrouded in obscurity. You would always be left with the question, am I just not fast enough? Or is the Barbarian too fast? And this limits the devs' ability to add effective and permanent solutions that will improve the gameplay experience for everyone. Imagine if now they can add a new ability available to all classes that elevates the game experience to new height, or if each class is given a unique way to overcome this problem. We could finally see the game evolve in a way that's far more rewarding and more fun. And for those gamers that are in the group that have lots and lots of time to pour into the game, the advantage is still on the table for you to get. It's just now less in gear, but in skill expression. You'll now know that if you won the fight, you truly played better. That time and effort went into you as a player, not your character as a gold farm. And to the players who want to procure the finest set with the most insane stats, that has not gone away. If anything, the pursuit has just shifted in focus. The odds of a unique rolling perfect stats is almost 0, and if you have a full set of even perfectly rolled epics, you'll still have a fantastic advantage, just no longer a guaranteed win. Maybe now we can focus on how it feels to play over what stats say you should play. And this leads me into my second point. Your kit is still a massive game changer. It's just the position of the value has changed. It's now all focused on the secondaries, instead of having any focus on the primary stats at all. And hit point totals have been reduced across the board, reducing the amount of successful hits you need to win a fight. This subtly reduces the value of kiting, as one successful ambush can win an engagement for the attacker. This is one of the few ways that the toxic kite meta can be stopped, and it's attacked on the other end by reducing move speed overall. Players are more stuck where they choose to be, and it's less likely that putting your weapon away and running will be successful. If you've ever landed a perfect ambush on a warlock just to have him phantomize and just stay out of reach for 4 minutes while you can't escape or engage, then you know how unfun a system that allows players to easily and perfectly recover from an ambush is. Now this outcome is still possible, but far less likely. It's now worth trying the ambush, and the warlock needs to be much quicker and more aware at all times. This I consider to be a good thing. Move speed being so hyper valuable was never good for the game, and there's only a couple ways they can combat it. If they stayed on the previous track they were on, where move speed was everything, any high-end kit that doesn't end in 315 move speed or higher is considered unplayable garbage. Unless you have an ability that can get your move speed up to the cap, of course. And in that system, how could they possibly bring players away from that evaluation? Move speed is king for obvious reasons. If you can't get hit, you can't lose. So because of that, speed is always king. That combined with the high hit point total, meaning that mistakes can easily be forgiven, by being able to just walk away slightly faster. It makes the game repetitive and predictable. The second you see an enemy is much faster than you, you know you're outclassed. They can miss 90% of their shots and it doesn't matter. You can't catch them, so you can't win. So this drives ever more and more players to rely on ranged attacks and lightning fast sprint builds like the Ronald Dagger Fighter. You see so many creative builds and different ways to play, like a demon form longsword warlock, a team buffing barbarian, or a crystal sword wielding wizard, become a joke. They're just a way to troll your team, as there's such limited ways to play the game. Think of this as a time to experiment, and you're no longer bound by the same limitations and rules. Those same limitations and rules have been shattered now. The great game has been truly shaken up, and what was meta is no longer an untouchable position for many. The new meta can shift, and all players can pivot to it and around it, and with more accessibility and fluidity. And this brings me to my third and final point. I have multiple friends that have far less time to play the game than I do. I don't even have that much time to start with. They went as hard as they could when Dark and Darker released, and they love the game. But the many hours that I play, follow, and research the game is something they don't have. And they know that if I ask them to come back and drop a couple games in the previous version of the game, they need to undertake a crash course in the current meta and are likely going to be stuck sucking the hind teat for many hours before they gain their footing, and even enough gear to even play. And by the time they're happy with how the game feels, they've run out of time. Now, with the balance of the game shifting away from grinding for gold and gear at its center for success, brought closer to personal skill, it's easier for returning and new players to figure out how to play. They also now get to start playing feeling like they're competently kitted and prepared for the PvE in the dungeon, and not like they're getting punished for having a life outside of the dungeon. More players that return more frequently and more new players is how a game stays alive. I would rather Iron Mace focus on retention, where the core gameplay loop is more receptive to a casual player base, rather than have the core gameplay loop being so specialized and time consuming that it pushes new and returning players away. And with the socket system mentioned by SDF before, or the idea of an arena becoming a ranked place for us tryhards to get the let out, I'm excited to see what the next step for the team will be. This return to form reminds me more of the playtests and the lightning in a bottle the game had then, when I didn't know exactly what every class could do and what was behind every door. The dungeon feels like more of a dangerous place than ever, while putting more power in the hands of the player to decide their own destiny with a reasonable amount of time to play the game. Again, all are good things with a little foresight about the future, and instead of asking for the old game back, we should be asking what they have for the tryhards next. We should not be forgotten, but the core gameplay needs to be welcoming, and then Iron Mace needs to raise the ceiling with new and exciting challenges. In closing, I'd like to give a short recap why I believe this patch is a good thing. First, gear is still valuable, just less relevant. It can now take a backseat to skill expression and allow the devs to focus on balancing less variables for a better game overall. Second, the meta can finally evolve. The game had backed itself into a corner on how to change valuable statistics. Move speed, health, and PDR, rendering stats like buff duration, resourcefulness, and spellcasting speed all but irrelevant. So much so that players can't imagine the pursuit of other statistics. A big sign of stifled creativity. Third, gives more incentive to new and returning players because the feel of playing the game is a greater priority than the reward of playing it a lot. Now we should be asking ourselves, what will Iron Mace add for the diehards and the tryhards? And I reiterate, we shouldn't be asking for them to give us the old game back. If this change sees an evolution in the endgame content for the tryhards and diehards, like myself and likely many of you, and allows the player base to grow in the process, this is the best thing we could have ever asked for, even if there are some growing pains in the process. And if anything, the player base's reaction to this change just works to an exclamation point of why it was needed. These are people up in arms, disgusted and betrayed because they no longer have an insurmountable gear advantage on the Timmies. And when they fight their peers, it'll be more about what they do compared to what they have. There are certainly balance issues, as there always have been, but this is a way for them to hammer down on those nails in the long run and give us back the Dark and Darker that captured our hearts and imaginations oh so long ago. And I'd like to add an extra note, that anyone who calls for the downfall of SDF is a troll and you need to do better. This game exists because of him. He is the mind that made this experience we're all here to partake in. To not only be passionate enough to care about the game on one hand, then to turn to discrediting and hating him on the other is pure ignorance. He made the thing that you love enough to hate. We trusted him when we held the line and they delivered the final playtest through a torrent. We trusted him when multiclassing and creep became too much to handle. And now we don't trust him because he shifted the value of our shiny gear. So to all my fellow Dark and Darker fans out there, I say, stay positive and let the chef cook. All we have to do is hold the line. Thank you so much for watching the video to the end. If you did make it this far, maybe consider liking and subscribing for more content like it. I don't normally participate in topics like this, but I really felt I had to say something because of the incredible amount of negativity surrounding it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.